The European Union's responded to the US steel tariffs, and we're back again in a trade war.
Tariffs are taxes. They are bad for business and worse for consumers. They are disrupting supply chains. They bring uncertainty for the economy. Jobs are at stake, prices up. Nobody needs that on both sides, neither in the European Union nor in the United States.
It's really interesting the tone that the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was using when she was announcing these tariffs. It's almost like a sort of inevitability, like, oh, we've got to do this again. You know, the Trump administration is doing this and now we have to respond. And also one of the things that they're doing is basically repeating the tariffs that they put on the United States products back in the first Trump administration. So on things like bourbon whiskey and power boats and like motorcycles, so Harley Davidsons, these sort of iconic products. What's really interesting, and I think that's important to remember, is that tariffs are paid for by the people importing. So me, Jack, stood here in Brussels. If I want to import a Harley Davidson after the 1st of April with these tariffs, then I have to pay to bring it in. So it stops me from buying it. It doesn't put a necessary tax on that company. And same, if Chad in San Diego wants to buy my steel from Europe, he has to pay to get it into the United States. It's not me as the steel producer in Europe. And that's what's happened. So there's $28 billion worth of tariffs on steel from the United States. And what they've announced is 26 billion euros worth of tariffs on American products coming into the European Union. Now, the Trade Commissioner, Maros Sefcovic, he was also at that press conference in Strasbourg announcing the retaliatory tariffs. And I've always wondered this. I think that the reason he became the Trade Commissioner is because he's well known, quite level. And I think Ursula von der Leyen appointed him for that. When I was watching the press conference, I thought maybe that's why she made him Trade Commissioner, sort of in anticipation of all of this stuff going on. And he was quite clear. Again, a sort of inevitability, clearly some frustration. This is what he said.
During my visit to Washington to raise these points, it was indeed clear that the EU is not the problem, making today's measures even more unjustified. I argue to avoid the unnecessary burden of measures and countermeasures, but you need a partner for that. You need both hands to clap. The US administration has opted to pursue a harmful course of unjustified tariffs, leaving us with no choice but to respond, and that's exactly what we are doing.
So we're back in what are essentially trade wars. The trade of tariff, that is a trade war. It's worse for Canada. They've got 50% tariffs by the United States on their steel imports. The question is how much further this will go. Last time the Trump administration in his first term, they kind of held off. Also, just side note, trade wasn't necessarily easy under the Biden administration. He brought in an Inflation Reduction Act that really encouraged American companies to work amongst themselves, and European companies felt muscled out. So it wasn't plain sailing throughout that period as well. But this is the sort of trade wars are back, and we'll have to wait and see what will go forward. I think there's this sense amongst the European leadership, especially here in Brussels, that this is kind of something that was always going to happen. They were to expect it, but also that this is not the biggest or the worst issue that they have to confront. The big issue at the moment is, and will remain, the US pulling support for Ukraine.